Hey, everyone. Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. Hope you're doing well. We are in my Gmail inbox today, and the reason that we are in my Gmail inbox today is because we're looking at an article. Now, this article is a article on the Wall Street Journal that is behind a paywall. It was penned by my good buddy Neil Shah, who recently did a piece on Kendrick Lamar, and he quoted me in the piece. So shout out to him for that. And also shout out to Sherry who gave some big ups to my piece on Eminem and the IPO and the whole investment thing. We'll link to this video at the very end of this video. But anyway, Neil wrote a very fantastic article about negative reviews and the disappearance and the lack of negative music reviews in the modern age. And again, like I said, it's behind a paywall, but he sent it to me personally in an email, and I asked him for permission to read and reference this article in this video. He gave me the okay, so again, shout out to Neil, and thank you very much to him for letting me talk about this article in this video. Appreciate it. So Neil brings up some really interesting information over here. Now, a lot of you might be feeling like maybe I'm too negative on albums or something like that, but the thing is, in the grander scheme of reviews in general, my reviews are not really all that negative, and music reviews are actually super duper positive. Now, we have some very interesting statistics here taken from 2012 to 2016 off of Metacritic, which aggregates some of the biggest and most relevant critics out there. And it says over these 4 years, 2012, 13, 14, 15, 16, 5 years, I'm guessing if they did the entirety of 2016, I'm imagining they didn't cut it off at 2016, but 4 to 5 years here, you have 7,287 albums, okay, reviewed on Metacritic. You have pages for all these albums, you have reviews aggregated for all of these albums, and out of all of those, only, let's see, only a certain amount actually got a red score. Let's see, 8. So only 8 out of 7,000. Only does that small percentage of records actually receive uniformly negative reviews. Now, if you contrast that with movies, you have Metacritic, and this is a very short sampling of time, you have Metacritic saying that 39 out of 380 movies have a red score just so far this year. So just in the past 10 months, which is actually kind of crazy when you think about it. Now, I get that in the grander scheme of things, most people sort of see Hollywood and the movie industry as being a little bit more out of ideas than the music industry is at the moment. But I don't know if you could simply chalk it all up to that, because there are some big artists and albums out there that honestly, I personally don't take super close note of a lot of the time, because much of the time I'm just focused on coming out with my reviews. I'm not trying to keep track of how many positive reviews an album has, how many negative reviews an album has, because I'm just trying to focus on my thing. And I'm trying to avoid other reviews too, because I don't want to accidentally lift or reference something someone else says and plagiarize, rip somebody off. Just I want my ideas to be coming out of my head, and that's it. Not that I think it's bad necessarily to be influenced or anything, but that's like really an issue and really a problem I don't want to deal with. And I think it's all around a better practice than not. And a lot of music reviewers that I've met and talked to do roughly the same thing, unless they're talking to a source or a person who has an opinion on a record where, they trust their taste and they trust their own taste, and they know that they're not necessarily going to be influenced or swayed by that one source or person that they may know intimately or personally. So considering this information, it's just really strange and actually kind of awe-inspiring that there are so few negative reviews on records, that you don't have them swaying aggregate scores of albums on Metacritic in the same way that you have in movies, and probably a little bit in the game world too. I don't know what the reviews are like on Metacritic for video games and stuff. I don't know if they have that same kind of need for positivity as it seems like is almost necessary in music. But as we have later in the article, we see artists like Adele, Beyonce, Taylor Swift routinely, and no matter what, they all get super positive, uniformly positive reviews. And what ends up happening is that you just have just nothing but green scores floating up on Metacritic in every direction. And there are some interesting points that are brought up that could be leading to this reasoning. Now, there are some things in this article that I disagree with. We have one critic, Joseph Schaefer, who did not enjoy the new Radiohead album, A Moon-Shaped Pool, or sort of called the record out as being, half B-sides or half older material the band had played live, and they finally decided to put it on an album now. I personally do really, truly enjoy and own that record. I think it's a hauntingly beautiful and a minimal and a very spacey album. And it's not like this is the first time that Radiohead has had material that was much older on a newer album, and they just kind of decided to record it now for a current release. I mean, In Rainbows, Nude is certainly a prime example of that. Just because a song is old doesn't necessarily mean that it's not worth putting on an album, or that it's just merely a B-side or merely should be thrown away or something like that. It is a track that they kind of re-envisioned and produced and performed specifically for that project and with that album in mind. And despite the fact that much of the material on A Moon-Shaped Pool might be B-sides, it doesn't ruin the experience, the listening experience for me. However, that being said, you have a lot of music writers and reviewers now in the internet age, as this article states, making $75, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little less to review a particular album. And if that review is super duper negative, that person's name is going to be on that byline, and they may be getting some really gross or nasty hate online for their review. That is something that I personally have seen secondhand happen to other people. That's something that has personally happened to me. However, I'm sort of doing reviews and I'm writing reviews for myself. This is my own venture at the end of the day. I may not necessarily be as incentivized to put my neck and my sort of opinion on the line if I'm just writing for somebody else's site. So, I mean, we're really talking about simple economics and incentives here. Because at the end of the day, if you want to get another writing gig, you want your review to be well received. You want people to like your review. And a one-way ticket to getting your review hated on and shat all over and turned into this really ugly, controversial piece of music writing is by being super negative, by being super critical. And that could potentially be an incentive behind why sites and why a lot of writers are afraid to be overly negative on a lot of newer records, especially if those records have very big followings behind them because they're being released by very popular artists, Beyonce, Adele, Taylor Swift, the list goes on. And of course, and something that I have mentioned in videos on this channel prior, another thing, and this sort of goes back to that video that I made about Chance the Rapper and his team reacting to some of the slightly negative criticism on MTV's website, which they requested be taken down or altered. It seems like there's this increased necessity for websites to be super kind and super promotional when it comes to talking about music, when it comes to talking about albums, because at the end of the day, a lot of it is access journalism. You are getting traffic and you are getting attention on your website off of not just reviews of that artist's album, but also potentially a live video of that artist's concert or an interview with that artist or some other piece of exclusive information that you're getting from that artist or you're getting from their team merely because you're on good terms with that artist. At the end of the day, I focus on and I just kind of do my reviews. I have some extracurricular videos out there like interviews and the like, and stuff like this. But I make it my business to focus mostly on the reviews, and if that pisses somebody off, it pisses somebody off. Like at the end of the day, my career is not hinging on whether or not your album, whether it's a platinum album or it's an album that only has 1,000 purchases, gets a positive review or not. Okay? Even if I'm negative on your particular album, the next day I'm going to come out with another review and then another review and then another review, and that's just how I'm doing things. That's just my grind. I'm at the point where I don't need to sweat. Oh, do I need to be really positive here? Do I need to be really nice? Who will be pissed off at me if I don't like this album? Like that for me is sort of I'm sort of beyond having to worry about that. And but still, I understand that there are people out there who don't have that luxury, and I completely sympathize with it. And I think music sites need to do a better job of standing behind their writers, paying them adequately, so that if somebody actually does, feel negative feelings toward a record, they can give an honest opinion and not have to worry about any potential sort of dramatic or social blowback from what their opinions might be. So between again this need for access to artists, this want to be this want to be promotional and rah with every big album that comes along, it was something that in the back of my head I felt like was going on. But it's amazing that Neil has sort of put together a very well written article with a lot of good details here that actually kind of puts in a little raw some raw numbers here, so I can actually kind of see it in black and white how few negative reviews there actually are. So few that, again, you're talking about 8 out of over 7,000 albums over the past 5 years getting uniformly negative reviews. Now, he doesn't list what those albums are. I would be interested to see what those albums are, but you have to be joking. You have to seriously be joking. There are certainly more than 8 albums over the past 5 years that were bad, that were just hands down bad. Now, I get and I understand that it's subjective. Some people enjoy things that other people hate. It's totally cool. I get it. But the idea that just 8 albums out of over 7,000 deserved or would receive uniformly negative reviews is kind of ridiculous. Like we know that there aren't that many great albums out there. That's almost like nearly every album coming out over the past 5 years being great, and we know that that's not true. We know that there aren't 7,000 great records released over the past 5 years. There have not been that many great albums. I personally feel like I'm pushing it a little bit when I say that there are 100 great albums that I want to mention to you guys, and I do like a top 100 or a top 50 of the year. You know what I mean? I feel like that is pushing it a little bit sometimes. But to insinuate that there are over 7,000, or even even to say that there are 2,000 fantastic albums that came out over the past 5 years is really stretching it. And the fact that, again, we're over 7,000, we're really nearing 10,000 here, just kind of goes to show just how little negative reviews are out there, and why are there so few negative reviews. The fact that there are so little getting out there into the ether is kind of strange, and I think says a lot about the current state of music journalism. That you just don't have a lot of raw and challenging and pot-stirring opinions out there that are really trying to get the audience to think and consider what it is exactly that makes them like this album, or what it is exactly that makes a piece of music entertaining or appealing. There was a quote toward the end of this thing where one particular writer was talking about how it's good in this new wave of positivity and openness that even things like nu metal are being kind of reconsidered, because music criticism and writing should be more than just about whether or not something is good. And I don't know. I mean, I feel like whether or not something is good is a pretty good standard to go by. Maybe that makes me old. I really don't know. But I feel like somebody has to be kind of critiquing things out there. And I don't want to be the only one doing it. I invite other people in on the idea of tearing things apart, being negative, of course, when it's called for, when things are not really that good. Come on in. The water's fine. It's fun. It's a fun time. I'll see you guys in the next video. Over here next to my head is that video that I said I would link to earlier. Or you can hit the link to subscribe to the channel. You're the best forever.